like and we use very regularly in this parish. One of them is we use the opening of the year Mass for all our primary schools every September. It's a little piece called What Really Makes a School Just Tick. And then another little piece that we regularly use when we have our Mass to remember babies who died before, during or after birth, or even celebrating the funerals of little babies. We use another lovely little reflection piece called Dear Parents, the little babies speaking to their parents. Both of these pieces, along with a lot of other lovely pieces, were written by our guest speaker tonight, Christy Kenneally. Christy, you probably know him from the programme a number of years ago on RT television, No Frontiers, and works in a communication advisory capacity in so many places as well, and author. He's a broadcaster, a poet, and has written a number of novels as well, thrillers. And so he's a very well-known speaker. And believe it or not, he was a priest one time as well, but he got sentenced. He's from Cork, but he lives in Wicklow now with his wife and family. So I'm very glad and very happy that he's come to join us tonight, and I'd like to welcome him in a very, very special way. Very welcome, Christy.
Thank you, Father John. And thank you, ladies and gentlemen. After an introduction like that, I can't wait to hear what I have to say. I should tell you that the time I was writing the poetry for the children, I had no children myself at the time, so you're always a genius about children until you have them, as you know. But one day, didn't I meet in Cork this lady with her daughter? And the lady said to her daughter, and I'll translate this to you from the Cork accent, "This is the man who wrote the poems in your book." And I said to the little one, in my innocence, "And did you like the poem, love?" And she looked at me and she said, "Could you write them shorter?" Everybody has their own trouble, don't they? I was thinking of it coming down tonight, and I was thinking, wouldn't it be lovely to go out for an evening and just sit down, and have Mass, but maybe not have a speech or a sermon, because we are worn out from speeches in Ireland, aren't we? Everything in Ireland, every cockfight and dogfight, every baptism, funeral, weddings especially, you're sitting down because you're starving, right? You have the dinner, you want to go to a happy coma, somebody gets up and gives a speech. And then it's a great thing how they do it in Ireland, the MC has to give what they call an epidural to the entire audience. Which is to say, now we have the few words from. Now, no Irish person is culturally capable of saying a few words. If we wrote War and Peace, we'd only clear our throats. But anyway, there was a priest in Cork, and he was a man of few words, and he tended to use them pretty often. And he was a very quiet man. In fact, the neighbours used to say about him that if there was a lull in the conversation, he'd be sure to be in the thick of it. But God love him, if he came within 2 miles of a microphone, he lost the run of himself. He would take off. He could aquaplane linguistically for 45 minutes without taking a breath. They said he had giggles. And at weddings, of course, it was his great moment in the sun. And at this wedding, he stood up and took off. And after 45 minutes, one of the uncles of the bride, who had drunk not wisely but too well, couldn't stick it any longer and he called the waiter and he said, "Listen, I give you €50 if you go up and clock it." And the waiter said, "I'll do it from now on." And he took a bottle and he slipped up behind him and he went for a little bowler box, took a lash at him, missed him, hit the father of the bride, who collapsed under the table. And the priest carried on talking until the voice from under the table said, "Hit me again, I can still hear you." Now, I don't mind if you fall asleep because I'm a married man and I'm quite accustomed to talking in somebody else's sleep. So, just be comfortable. I want to tell you another little story, but this story is about Marseille. Mercy is a very old-fashioned word. So let's give it a more modern and ordinary word. This story is about forgiveness. And it is how I discovered what forgiveness was when I was a young fella. When I was 5, my mother died. And I took sanctuary in my grandfather's lap. And I took up residence there, they tell me, for the best part of a year. And during that time, I took up smoking the pipe as well. Now, there wasn't anything in my pipe, but I had it in my mouth. And every time he blew, I blew. And gradually as I grew up, it became tall toy, so I got to fill the pipe and peel the plug and rub it on my palm and put it in, light the match, hold it over the tobacco so he wasn't sucking sulphur. And then we'll all blow up the match and then the pipe would go out and we'd have to start all over again. But when I got to about 13 or 14, and when you know boys, when they get to 13 or 14, not girls now, but boys, most lads, you know, when God made man, she was only testing. But boys pass through puberty around 45, I think, is the average. But you know, when you're 13, you're a collection of ankles and elbows and acne and neurosis. You know, every bit of you is on a separate contract. You know, and you walk like an old sheepdog, like the back, you know that way, or the other half is going that way. And so, the high point of my week was playing 110 go pop every Saturday night. And we sat down very carefully at the fire, shuffled, dealt. We even had a dummy hand, and there was only 2 of us. And we played away. And one night, I think I caught him cheating. And I said to him, "You were cheating." "I was not." I said, "You most certainly were." "Oh, no, I wasn't," he said. "Well," I said, "that's the way you're going to play. I'm out of here." And I threw out the cards, went out, banged his door. My house was 2 doors down. Marched out to my house full of zeal and all sorts of things. Went into my father and with a puss on me that said, "I've good manners on him." And my father said, "What happened?" And I told him. And nobody said, "You can go up to Pop and you can apologise." Oh dear God. 2 doors, the longest walk of my life. You know, at that age, your bladder is very near your eyes. And particularly if you're a boy, you can't cry. So I went in and I was making up my little story all the way up the lane. And I went in and he was sitting where I left him. He had cards in front of him. And before I could say anything, he said, "'Tis your deal." And he dealt me a hand of forgiveness that night that I have never forgotten. Because in that little story is part of the secret of what forgiveness is. Forgiveness is gentle and kind. Forgiveness does not carry grudges. Forgiveness does not let you sweat. Forgiveness does not let you come out with your big rubbish and big brawl. Forgiveness doesn't blind you with silence for 2 days. Girls, do you hear that? Until the fella comes crawling in on his knees and he says, "I don't know what I did wrong, but I'm sorry." For God's sake, talk to me. Right? So that's the little story. And you know something? That's a nice little story about forgiveness, but it's about a small thing, isn't it? What happens if it's a big thing? What happens if it's the betrayal of a relationship, like a friendship, or a marriage, or a serious rift between sons and daughters and their parents? What happens when it's a serious thing like that? I think people will say to you, "Well, listen now, you have to forgive and forget." Did you ever try to forget something? Isn't it the surest way of keeping it in your mind 24 hours of the day? And with respect, some things are too important to forget. Because some things wreck a relationship and bring it into pieces on the floor. And we can't just casually get up the next day and continue as if nothing had happened between us. And sometimes people say, "Actually, you'll get back to normal." You know and I know that after anything serious in your life, like a bereavement, like a betrayal of friendship or relationship, you cannot go back to the normal you knew. Forgiveness is about getting down on your hands and knees in the rubble of that relationship, and trying to salvage or rescue whatever was loving there, whatever was at the heart of it. And if love was at the heart of it, despite the faults and failings and not being blind to the hurt either, if we can retrieve the pieces of love, we can put these down as a foundation to a new relationship, to a new normal, to a new loving. And if we can do that through blood, sweat, and lots of tears, then the chances are we will both have learned a compassion. We will both have expanded our hearts to a size that makes room in them for even the hurt that has been inflicted by this other. And the chances are that we can move on. Who is the person we find hardest to forgive? The person we find hardest to forgive is ourselves. Why? Because we were reared on saints. I certainly was. You know, I went to the Christian Brothers when they came and they told us about St. Damien, a fellow who was filled with arrows and all the rest of it. There wasn't a lot of arrows in our parish at the time. We had no hope of sanctity. But we were told that you had to be perfect, and you had to be this marvelous person, and we felt, you know, I'm never going to make that. I am not an honours Christian. I'd be lucky to get a pass. Right? The best we hoped for was purgatory. We lived lives, you could say, of constant regret about our sinfulness. We said things like, but sure, I'm only human, as if that was an excuse or a failure, rather than one of the greatest gifts that God has given any of us. We had expectations of ourselves that were unreal and that were not of God. There was an American tourist, in fact there was two of them in Cork last year. They were the only two we had in Cork. And they got lost because Cork is designed so you get lost. Then you have to go into a shop and buy a map to get out, in which case you're very good for the local economy. Or you have to talk to us and we find out all your business, which is even better. So they got separated. Now one of them eventually got so lost, I think he married a girl from Tokyo. They have 6 children now, he plays cornerback for the minor football team, and he's a very nice fella, get on very well. But the other fella was starving, and he went around looking for a place to eat. And he found himself up a lane in the centre of Cork, and there was a place. Now it was humble. Like there was the menu was outside the door, and the choice of the day was take it or leave it. And he went in, and there was this small little woman inside with a print apron. She was doing her best to keep the place one step above botulism. And she said to her, honey, I have a Caesar salad, heavy on the parmesan. I'll have a 16-ounce pepper steak with dauphinoise potatoes and steamed vegetables. For dessert, I guess I'll have creme brulee. And to drink, I'll have a bottle of Margaux 84. You got all that? Why, she said if we had all that, we days is no sex. So it's important to be real, isn't it? It's important to be real. Much better to be real than to be playing a role, like a holy role or a sanctimonious role, to be a real person. And that's why the scripture is so wonderful when it tells us, can I let you into a secret? The scripture tells us, it is not our love for God that matters. What matters is God's love for us. Isn't that great? Because honestly, I had difficulty in the concept of loving God. I had, until I read the scriptures which said, love your neighbour if you want to love God. Or how can you love God whom you cannot see, when you don't love your brothers and sisters whom you can see? So that in fact what Christianity is about is that God has sent his Son to be someone like us, in all our weaknesses, and in all our glory, and in all our crack, and in all our tears, and in every shadow and light of our lives. And that Son, because he became incarnate in each one of us, so that we are now the Christ in that sense, to one another and our brothers and our sisters. Who could forgive without throwing a stone? Has any man condemned you? Neither do I condemn you. Who could see past sinfulness and possibility? Who could look up into a tree at Zacchaeus, the man who had been excommunicated from his own community because he was a tax collector, and who had no words of judgment for him and said, Zacchaeus, come down, this night I will dine in your house. What a lovely sign of acceptance, to put your feet under the table with the so-called sinners and to show solidarity with them. And this is the good news for all of us, that we would be big enough to let our own hearts expand, to make room for a fault in another, that we would not hold grudges, because grudges embitter ourselves. We are holding them, they burden us. If I'm holding a grudge with two hands, I have no hands left for friendship. I have no hands left to put on a child's head, or to offer in love. I can't put my arms around anybody if I'm holding a grudge ahead of me in my two hands. So how important it is that we learn to let go, not to be a victim of the hurt. And I don't talk easily about people's hurts, because there are some hurts that in one sense cannot be forgiven, because they were done out of evil and malice by somebody who had no relationship with us, but we were used perhaps by that person at the time. Now there is the choice for us between being a victim and being a survivor. Because a victim means that as long as I hold that in my head and in my heart, and it affects the way I live and love other people, and I'm wary perhaps with my love, that the person who perpetrated that evil in my life has power over me forever, so long as I remain a victim of their hurt. But should I decide to survive, because survival means to live above. Now what does that mean? It means there is more to any of us here than our hurts or our failings or the betrayals that we have suffered in our lives. But to compensate for hurt, we need to build up the loving part of our lives. Mahatma Gandhi, shortly after the independence of India, there was a terrific hatred between Muslims and Hindus, particularly in the borders with Pakistan. And one time a Hindu came to Mahatma Gandhi and he said, I have murdered a Muslim. I must now go to hell. Is there any way I can escape hell? And Gandhi said to him, there is one way. You must go to this man's family, and you must take his son as your son. And you must bring that son up to be a good Muslim. And in that way, you will save your soul. And it is as if he's saying to us, if you can take the hurt that was done, and if you can turn that into an energy that does good for other people, if you can take your brokenness and make that your healing talent with other people, then you make the kingdom of God come for so many. This is what your children live with, and we should always apologize to our children when we get it wrong, thereby teaching them that being big doesn't mean you're right all the time, but that you are big enough and that they should be big enough to say sorry when it's merited. The last image I will leave you is of the foot of the cross. You will remember that what Jesus said was, Father, forgive them because they know not what they do. Not because he was the Son of God, but if they had any concept of the value of another human being, they would never have nailed another human being to the cross. Now here's the good bit. At the foot of the cross were two hugely important people in his life. His mother Mary and John, the beloved disciple. Think what it was like for those two people at that time. The chances are, if Mary was in fact a widow, that she would not live 12 months after him. Widows at that time did not survive their only sons by longer than a year, usually. The chances are that John, the beloved disciple, the enthusiast, the one who seemed to understand the soul of Jesus more than the others perhaps, that John would become so embittered by what had happened to his dream, because his dream was being crucified before his eyes, that he would become a bitter, sour person for the rest of his life, and to preserve and save both their lives and souls. He said, "Woman, behold your son. Son, behold your mother." He put them into a relationship with each other, knowing that it is relationship and love that is actually our ultimate reason for living and surviving. I wish you great joy. I wish you great love. I wish you forgiveness, and I wish you to be forgiven with a good heart.